Reports have it that Ben Johnson has agreed to become the next head coach of the Chicago Bears. What does this mean for the San Francisco 49ers? And has the San Francisco 49ers dropped the ball already this offseason?
Yo, it's time to grind. With Brian on the mic, content is one of a kind. Now, welcome to my show, the BS Report, where we let the truth flow. We're breaking down the stories, shining light on the games. No fake news here, just hot takes blowing flames. The BS Report, yeah, we're keeping it tight. Bringing you the news, making it ignite. Tune in, turn it up, feel the heat rise. With Brian in the house, our takes won't be compromised. From the latest news to the hottest debates, in the BS Report, we're setting the stakes. So come along, join the ride, where Brian and his subscribers are full of Niner pride. Yo.
What is going on, everybody? Welcome to the show. So Ben Johnson has agreed to become the next head coach of the Chicago Bears, in a move that to me is a little bit surprising. When I think about last offseason and all the hype and pursuit of Ben Johnson, him turning down the Washington Commanders job, or turning down the request to interview for it anyways, because he was looking for a situation that was perfect for him. He loved the position that he was in. He felt like he had a great thing going, and he didn't necessarily feel the need to leave that position for something that wasn't perfect for what he wanted. So fast forward to the end of the regular season this year. And even before that, honestly, there was rumors about Ben Johnson being intrigued by the Chicago Bears. I never really put much into that. I never really believed that it would happen because, let's be honest, the Chicago Bears are kind of a dumpster fire. They have been for the better part of 2 decades. They have not been able to get almost anything right in that time. I can think of Brian Urlacher. I mean, really, they have just made one blunder after another blunder after another blunder in almost the whole time that I've been paying any attention to football. So when Ben Johnson said last season that he was more interested in waiting for the perfect opportunity, I did not envision this Chicago Bears team being that opportunity. Especially when you consider the differences in the team that he's taking on and the team that he's leaving. You know, the way that he's going to play with Chicago and the way that he played with Detroit are not apples and apples. I mean, they're completely different. For one, his Detroit team is an indoor turf speed team. Always good weather inside that dome in Detroit. He's going to Chicago where it's outdoors, it's grass, it's cold, it's windy, there's elements. It just, to me, doesn't seem like the ideal situation for a Ben Johnson offense. You know, there was a lot of rumors about the Las Vegas Raiders having a lot of interest in Ben Johnson and him having interest in them. Some might say that that is also a dysfunctional organization, and those who say that would be 100% correct. Mark Davis, as an owner, is a bit of a joke. But here's a caveat to that situation. Tom Brady is now in the ownership group there and appears to be becoming a more prominent member of that front office, and appears to be taking on more of hands-on, in the forefront role in that front office. In fact, I suspect next year he will not stay with Fox and he will become more of a full-time member of the Raiders organization. So Tom Brady is the type of guy who's ultra competitive, for one. He is not going to stand by and just accept the dysfunction and losing culture that has been established in Las Vegas going back, since Mark Davis took over that team pretty much. Tom Brady's going to do everything in his power to turn that around. I truly believe that. Even as far as telling Mark Davis, to pull his head out of his what. So What I would say is if I was Ben Johnson, I would be looking at that situation with hope or maybe a little bit of optimism that maybe Tom Brady can turn it around. I definitely think that there's more of an opportunity for the Raiders to become less of a dysfunctional organization for the simple fact that Tom Brady's there now than the Bears. But with that being said, Ben Johnson has an opportunity here to make guys like me, because I'll be the first one to say I was advocating for the 49ers to move on for Kyle Shanahan in favor of Ben Johnson. And so Ben Johnson going to Chicago is either going to make guys like me look really smart or really dumb. And if it turns out that he is not able to turn that franchise around, if he is not able to set a culture there and be the head coach that I believe he can be, then I will be the first one to get up here and say, "Hey man, we dodged a bullet. I am glad that I didn't have the authority or the power to make that change in San Francisco." Because obviously he couldn't get it done. So I have a feeling that he's going to prove me right, because he just seems like the kind of guy, the kind of I base this off of the way that he calls offense. And by no means does any of this mean that he's a leader. By no means does any of this mean that he is a culture setter or any of that. Um, but when you are as creative as he is, and you have the type of offensive mind that he seems to me to have, to me that leads to me thinking that he is open to getting suggestions from other people. His aggressiveness, you know, either him and Dan Campbell were the perfect pick for each other, um, or he allowed the aggressiveness of Dan Campbell to rub off on him, and he embraced it, and he used that in his play calling. So that's the way I kind of look at it with him. Now, again, that has nothing to do with him being a leader. That has nothing to do with him setting a culture. But if he's willing to embrace ideas from other people, if he's willing to take the authenticity of somebody else, like Dan Campbell is authentically who he is, and he's willing to embrace that and incorporate some of that into himself, then why wouldn't he be able to set a good culture? Why wouldn't he be able to be open-minded to building a team first mentality in Chicago? So that's why, in all honesty, when I started thinking about who would be the perfect fit for the job in Chicago, my first inclination was somebody like a Vrabel, a Pete Carroll, um, somebody who's not necessarily known as a genius on either side of the ball. Pete Carroll came in as a defensive guy. Vrabel's a defensive guy, but the reality of those coaches is they're uniters. Pete Carroll's the kind of guy that his players will, lay down in front of a speeding car for him. They will run through a brick wall for him. Vrabel's the same kind of guy. They're the kind of guys that go in there and they set a culture. They set an attitude. And to me, that's what needs to happen in Chicago. They need to go in there, somebody, and it needs to be Ben Johnson now, needs to go in there and change the culture. More than the offensive ingenuity, more than defensive ingenuity, the number one priority in Chicago needs to be setting a culture, a mentality of winning and moving forward, getting better every day. That's what needs to happen in Chicago. And so we'll see if Ben Johnson can do that. He learned from another culture guy, Dan Campbell. So that gives me a little bit of optimism that he can, because if Dan Campbell is anything, he's a culture builder. He's a leader. He's a guy that his players will fight till the better end for him. And so Ben Johnson got a front row seat for 3 years at witnessing how that's done. So it leads me to believe that there's at least a chance that it can happen. There's at least the possibility that he might be able to go in there and turn some stuff around. And the other thing that Ben Johnson is going to have to prove with this position, and I'm super interested and very intrigued by if he can do this next part, because he's going to have to go in there and adjust his offense to that team. Wherever Kyle Shanahan goes, when he was at Atlanta with the Niners, when the Niners finally move off of him and he goes to his next stop, because he'll have another stop, his scheme is going to follow him wherever he goes. Now, I don't see that happening with Ben Johnson. In Detroit, he has the number 1 or number 2 best defense or offensive line in football. He's not going to have close to that in Chicago. Not close to that. He has one of the top rated running games in Detroit as well. Now, Swift is a good back, but he's not Jahmyr Gibbs or David Montgomery. So he's not going to be able to rely on that running game to the same extent that he did in Detroit to open things up. Now, that's not to say that through draft and free agency they can improve that, and maybe they can, but it's going to take more than one season to build the running game up to what it was in Detroit, to build the offensive line to what it was in Detroit, to build that overall culture. So to some degree, and plus they don't play on turf. They're not going to be able to play with the same speed. A lot of the trick plays and a lot of the creative things that they do, they will have to do creative things in different ways because it just doesn't translate to grass. And you can see that when Detroit plays on grass, they're not nearly as effective. So because of that, Ben Johnson is going to have to adjust his play designs, his play calling, the way that he's creative to fit his circumstances. And I believe he can. I really believe he can, because it seems like every time I watch a Detroit Lions game, there's new wrinkles to that team. And that's the sign of a coach who's continuously adjusting, continuously changing. This is not something that we see from Kyle anymore. And that's what's frustrating. That's one of the main reasons why I've been advocating for Kyle to move on, because it looks like he's lost his luster for that, for being creative, for whatever reason, whether it's that Mike McDaniel's left, whether it's, I don't know, honestly, but maybe he feels limited by his quarterbacks, and that's the other thing with Detroit. Ben Johnson had Jared Goff, who was the type of quarterback that got the ball out quickly. When you get pressure on Goff, he crumbles, he falls apart. So he got the ball out fairly quickly. Caleb Williams probably holds the ball longer than any quarterback in the NFL. Now, that can be coached out of him. Ben Johnson can coach that out of him, and a lot of that is going to be the offense. So, it's just going to be real interesting to see how Ben Johnson is able to evolve as a coach and shape the Bears into an offensive juggernaut that he had in Detroit, but different. And when he does that, it's going to be very, I'm a football junkie. I love football. I'm a 49ers fan, of course, but I love watching all teams and seeing how coaches adjust and how coaches evolve and how they make adjustments to what they do. And that's my biggest frustration with Kyle, is he doesn't do that. So it becomes stale, and it becomes easy to figure out, and the league catches up. And I think that's what's happening now. So I'm really excited to see how Ben Johnson is going to adjust and evolve as a coach with the Bears, and how he's going to be able to develop Caleb Williams, and how he's going to be able to develop that Chicago team and see what they turn into in a couple of years, see what they turn into even next year, because they really weren't good this year. So I think there's a lot of potential for them to be better. They got a lot of talent on that team. They just need someone to go in there and pull it all together and breed some confidence into Caleb Williams, because I do believe that was like a roller coaster all season long, where his confidence was up and down all year. And that's the worst thing that you can do to a quarterback. So it's going to be really neat to see what happens in Chicago coming up next season and moving forward after that. So the next thing I want to talk about is, with Ben Johnson accepting this job with the Chicago Bears, what does this mean for our San Francisco 49ers? Now, you can look at this one of two ways. You can look at it as, this is bad for us because Chicago is a fairly young team. Chicago does have talent on that roster, and they have the resources to add to it in draft capital and money to spend in free agency. So you can look at it like, oh man, if Ben Johnson goes over there and is everything to Chicago that he was to Detroit and then some, then all of a sudden you have another obstacle in your way in the NFC. You have another team that in a couple of years can be contending, and just another team you got to try to get through, along with the Commanders, along with Green Bay, along with Minnesota, along with the Lions, and and the Rams. If the Cardinals can get their quarterback situation right, they might be on the right track. There's a lot of up and coming depth in the NFC. And so Ben Johnson going to the Bears potentially adds another team to that. So in that regard, if he goes in there and he is the coach that I think he's going to be, and he turns that franchise around and he actually gets a winning culture and a winning mindset set in there and gets that team pointed in the right direction, then that could be bad for us. So the other way you can look at it is, Ben Johnson going to the Bears is good for us because the Lions lose him. And I'm here to tell you, like, this is a huge loss for the Detroit Lions. Um, that that it's as big of a loss for the Detroit Lions as it is a gain, if not bigger than it is a gain for the Chicago Bears, because it's really hard to it's going to be really hard to find a guy who is as creative as Ben Johnson, has the offensive mind, has the the play calling and aggressiveness of Ben Johnson. And it's just it's going to be, even if he has a guy that's under him that he's been training to take this position when he made this jump, it's going to be hard for that person to come in and pick up right where Ben Johnson left off. And so when you couple the loss of Ben Johnson, and rumors have it that if the Jets offer Aaron Glenn the head coaching job, he's going to take it. Now, when you look at the Jets, if there's an organization that's more dysfunctional than the Bears or the Raiders, it's damn well the Jets. So if they have a coach of the caliber of Aaron Glenn that's willing to take the position, they should offer that job to him yesterday. So I would say the odds are pretty high that Aaron Glenn is going to be the next coach of the Jets. So when you couple the loss of Ben Johnson, most likely the loss of their defensive coordinator, on top of the way they went out this season against the Commanders, I can see, at least for next year, the Lions having a down year, real similar to the year that the 49ers had this year. I can see them just being beaten down by how hard they fought this year. They fought through the injuries. They fought through everything. They fought through the heartbreaking defeat that they had to the 49ers in the NFC Championship last year when they were up by so much and lost. So they had to battle that all offseason last year. And then they come into the regular season and they start just getting decimated by injuries. Their defensive captain, their defensive leader goes down with a gruesome injury. And then it's been injury after injury after injury after that. And then to keep fighting and keep fighting and keep fighting, and to make the playoffs as the number 1 seed, go 15-2, and then come up against the Washington Commanders with a rookie quarterback, a team that was hot trash prior to this year, and lose in the fashion that they did, the heartbreak that that team must feel. And then on top of that, you're gonna compound all that with losing your offensive coordinator and your defensive coordinator. I mean, wow, that's a lot. So I can see the Lions having a very big emotional letdown next year and just really kind of taking their foot off the gas, for lack of a better term. I don't know. Not that I think they won't try as hard. I just think that they can be a little bit just emotionally unprepared for next year. Really a lot like the Niners this year. I don't know if this is a hot take or not, but I can honestly see a way where the Detroit Lions finish last in that division next year. If you really think about it, and you think about Green Bay being on the come up, and you think about the Vikings being on the come up, whichever way they go, whether it's with Sam Darnold or JJ McCarthy. Now, I'm not a Darnold guy. I don't have any belief in Darnold. But he proved this year he can get you wins in the regular season. You just can't count on him to win you a game. So, you know, and then the Bears. So I really do think that there's a good possibility of the Lions finishing last in that division. In fact, I'm halfway inclined to go on to one of these betting sites and putting a little bit of money down on the Lions finishing last in that division next year. So what it means for the 49ers, it could be good or bad. I think in the immediate future, it's probably good. I think that it really, really depletes Detroit. I think it really hurts them. And I think Chicago, even if Ben Johnson is everything that I think he's going to be, I still think that they are probably a few years away. I would say year 3. Year 1, he's going to go in there and kind of tear it down. And when I say tear it down, I don't mean gut the team. When I say tear it down, I mean he's got to break bad habits. He's got to install a new culture. He's got to kind of go in there and evaluate the kind of team he wants to have and what players fit that mold, what players are going to be able to have the buy-in that he had in Detroit, and weed out the ones that aren't. That takes some time. And then next year, I can see them having, a pretty decent year, maybe even sniff the playoffs or make the playoffs. In Ben Johnson's second year. But to really truly be a contending team, a team that we need to worry about, I would say if Ben Johnson is lights out, a great coach, year 2, but more than likely year 3 is what I'm thinking. So in the long run, probably not great for the 49ers. But in the short term, because of what it's going to do to Detroit, I think that the hiring of Ben Johnson to the Bears is a good thing for the 49ers. Which leads me to my final point. The reports are out that the leading candidate to take the defensive coordinator position with Ben Johnson in Chicago is Dennis Allen. So the 49ers already missed out on Jeff Ulbrich because he went to the Falcons. Now they're going to probably lose out on Dennis Allen. What if Robert Saleh, who it appears that they're putting all their eggs in his basket, what if Robert Saleh accepts a head coaching job? Have the 49ers already on January 20th, 2025, have they already dropped the ball on this offseason? Have they already effed it all up, for a lack of a better word? What is their fallback? If those 3 guys are gone, what are they going to do? Hire Brandon Staley? I mean, puke. Man. No. Who wants to see that? I would have rather gave Sorensen another year, honestly. Man, this is crazy. It's like they keep repeating the same things over and over and over again. This team does. You know, Kyle Shanahan. I don't. It blows my mind. I would really love to know what his thought process is because I don't understand it at all. You know, and honestly, if I was Robert Saleh, I would be offended. I would be so offended. I would call Kyle and be like, "You asshole." I would tell him, "Are you really not going to interview any other coaches, any other DCs? You're so sure that I'm not going to get a job with any other team that you're not even going to bother to interview guys? So what do you think? Yeah, Robert, he ain't getting no job. Do you see how bad he effed up in New York? He ain't getting a job. I'm serious. If I was Robert Saleh, I would call Kyle and John and be like, "Screw you and your job, you assholes. I'm not taking that job. That's offensive." They're so sure he's not going to get another position as a head coach that they're not even going to interview defensive coordinators. That's crazy. They're fumbling this whole offseason already. We're not even to the NFC Championship game yet, and the Niners have already effed it up. You know, it gives you like last season vibes a little bit because what is the holdup? Even if they wanted to hire Saleh, even if that was their guy, you still interview as many guys as you can. You don't just sit there because you never know what's going to happen. What if Robert Saleh's wife comes to him all of a sudden and be like, "You know what, babe? I really don't want to live in Northern California. I really don't want to pay those taxes. I really don't want to be there. I want to be somewhere else." Anything. I mean, any number of things can happen. And the Niners are just going to kind of just sit back and watch as the whole rest of the league fills out their staffs and hires their coaches. Like, it's like every player that the 49ers want to have, or every coach, I mean, that the 49ers want to have or interview, they just sit back and watch them go somewhere else. So I don't know. It makes no sense to me at all. At all. They haven't hired a defensive coordinator. They haven't hired a special teams coordinator. They effed up the hiring of the offensive coordinator. How they even got somebody to interview for the OC job to fit in with the Rooney rules beyond me, because anybody who interviews for that job knows it's just a joke. So it's just crazy. It is. You know, it's funny because Kyle Shanahan, when he's asked how come Brock Purdy doesn't set his own protections, or how come Brock Purdy isn't allowed to audible in the way that most quarterbacks audible. I'm not saying, you know, can where you have two plays and you can go to the other one. I mean an actual real life audible. And Kyle's response to that is because he doesn't need to. Everything that he needs is built into the play. He just needs to execute. Well, damn it, Kyle. I assume that when the regular season ended, you and John put together a game plan for the offseason. So execute the damn game plan, Kyle. Are you freaking serious? Like, lock in, bro. I mean, if this is the game plan, then, I mean, how can any of the Kyle Shanahan superfans be like, we need to keep this guy? If his game plan is seriously to put all his eggs in the Robert Saleh basket and, you know, wish on a star that he doesn't get another job, how can you defend that? How can you defend not interviewing potential coaches? I mean, it's been how many days? Same thing with the Brock Purdy contract. Now you all know that I am not an advocate for paying him $50 to $65 million a year. I'm just not. But if you already know in your head that no matter what, you're not going to make him play on the final year of his deal. You you already know that, like you did with Bosa, like you did with Debo, like you did with Ayuk, like you did with Trent, like you did with CMC, you're going to cave. You're going to pay him what he wants. If that's what you already know, then just do it. Get it over with. Seriously, let's get rolling in the right direction. You could have paid him already for what? Since January 6th, I believe. So you've had 14 days where you could have got this done already. And I mean, I'm not saying that we're at any kind of a potential holdout, but what is the wait? I know that the 49ers know what Purdy wants. I know that they know whether or not that's where they're at. And I also know that they know whether or not they're going to match it, where they're going to come up to that number if they're not there yet. They know that they are or they're not. And if you're not going to do it, if you've already made the decision to move on from him, then do it. Do something. That's the most frustrating thing, I think, as a 49ers fan at this point, is they're doing nothing. It's crickets coming out of Santa Clara right now. And I don't understand it. I don't understand it at all. You know, at the end of the season press conference, they're saying how they know changes need to be made and they need to reevaluate this, that, and the other. Okay, I get it. You can't tell me that's not done. You've reevaluated. Now it's time to move on that game plan. Now, if the idea is to get rid of Brock, I understand that probably takes time and maybe, that wouldn't be done by now. But I am damn near 100% certain that that's not the avenue that they're going down. They're going to pay him. I don't agree with it, but that's what they're going to do. So get the damn thing done already. So that at least we as fans can have a little bit of optimism that at least you guys are all going in the same direction. You guys are all building towards unity. You guys are all trying to fix the wrongs of last season. Whether we agree as content creators and fans, whether we agree with the direction you decide to go, at least we can all see that you're going in the same direction. I don't know if I'll say the right, but the same direction. You have a plan and you're executing it. You have a plan and you're taking it step by step. But right now, it looks like your plan is to sit around and hope everything falls into place. Get Purdy paid if that's what you're going to do. Get your DC signed if that's what you're going to do. Get your OC signed. Get a special teams coordinator signed so you can start focusing on the draft and free agency. Get your DC in place so that you know what kind of defense you're going to run, so you know what kind of players you're going to need to look at. I would like to think that if you hire a defensive coordinator, you're going to want his input on potential draft picks and free agents. You're hiring him to run a defense. You should want to know what his feelings are on that stuff. And the combine is in a month and 6 days. So it might be beneficial to get him in there a little bit earlier than the combine so that he can get a good look at what he wants to do. I mean, what do you wait? What's the holdup? What's the holdup? At least give interviews to other players or other coaches. I'm sorry. Give interviews to other coaches so that if the solid thing doesn't work out, you at least have an idea of the next guy who you would hire after him and what his ideas for a defense is and what players he would like to project to draft or what players he would like to sign in free agency. Because the way you're doing it now, I mean, it's not it makes no sense. And that's the most frustrating thing sometimes about being a fan under this regime is the way that they operate is just stupid sometimes. I was arguing with a uh 49ers fan. Um I wouldn't say arguing. I was having a back and forth with him a little bit on Brock Purdy's contract. And his thing was that players are paid on past performance. And my thing is, no, that's not the way it's supposed to work. You pay a player on which you project his output to be going forward. Now, you base that projection somewhat on his past performance, depending on how old he is, how many years he's played, what kind of injuries he's had, things of that nature. So, yes, you use his past performance to project his future production, but you do not pay him based on what he's already done. That's a stupid way of running an NFL team. But it sure as hell seems like that's the kind of dumb shit this team does. So, man, I don't even know. All I know is that up until this point, it really does feel like the Niners are effing up this whole offseason already, right off the bat. So my thing is Jed needs to hire somebody. Not and I'll get off the whole Jed needs to hire Kyle a boss thing. Fine, whatever. Jed needs to hire somebody that is his go-between, right? Somebody who actually maybe knows a little bit about football. Can't be Parag, but it needs to be somebody who can go in there and be like, Kyle, come on, Kyle. Let's get something going here, man. Like, we got to turn this around. We're trying to raise our even if he uses this phrase or this reasoning. Hey, we want to raise ticket prices again, but we can't do that if you keep putting this shit out on the field. So how about if we get some stuff rolling here and give our fans a little bit of optimism, a little bit of hope? Hey, Kyle, how about you don't be so stubborn and stuck in your ways? How about if you are a little bit self-aware and open to a little bit of change? And when Kyle's about to do something really dumb, like, maybe extend Debo's contract or renegotiate it and stretch it out. How about if somebody Jed hires just be like, no, Kyle, we're not doing that dumb shit again, Kyle. Let's just hold off on that right now. He just needs somebody in there, basically, not to tell Kyle what to do, more to tell Kyle what not to do. And maybe light a little bit of a fire under his ass from time to time. Because thus far, this offseason, really don't seem like there's any urgency in this team. And I don't know. I feel like there needs to be a little bit more than none. I mean, at least put out some fake news. At least be like, yeah, we're interviewing this guy, and this guy, or we've completed interviews with this guy. At least fake it. Because, man, it just seems like at this point in time, in this moment, the Niners really are wishing on a star that Robert Saleh is not going to get a job. And like I said, if I was Saleh, I would tell the Niners to stick it right up their ass. I would. I'd be like, man, you really think that little of me? You really think that there's no chance that I'm getting a job? You're so sure there's no chance I'm getting a job that you are not even going to interview anybody else. That's crazy. So that's my thoughts, guys. That's my kind of what I was thinking today when I seen the news of Ben Johnson to the Bears, and especially when I seen who he's bringing in as DC. When I seen he was going to take Dennis Allen as his DC, I was really like, what in the hell are the 49ers doing? Not that I'm a big proponent of hiring Dennis Allen, but shit, I mean, he's someone that you're considering. So, and for the love of everything, please do not promote Brandon Staley to the defensive coordinator position. That will just ruin my whole offseason. So, anyhow, guys, thanks again for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe. And I look forward to talking to you all in the next one.